Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we want to talk about this, the Minisforum MS-03, and in today's quick-ish video we're going to be doing a before you buy, a should you buy, ultimately deciding whether the MS-03 deserves your money and your data. Before we go any further, we do need a wee bit of context. Let's face it, in summer, autumn 2026, we know powerful mini PCs are out there. There are 10 a penny organisations pumping out little mini computers with batshit crazy CPUs under the bonnet. However, most of them don't fit the bill of the term Workstation, and rewind time back to November, December 2023, when this brand Minisforum rolled out the MS-01. Frankly, a lot of people took notice. Some of the biggest platforms in the market, not just here on YouTube and the web review scene, but I am talking Dell, HP, Lenovo and the like, that already had ranges of quite powerful workstations that were never really worried about the mini PC trend because they set themselves apart from that. And then these guys came along and started rocking out proper workstations, 10 gig, decent CPU scalability. Now, fast forward to 2026, summer, autumn, we know plenty about this brand. We know plenty about this design. We're kind of used to this whole modular thing. It's cool, and I will talk about it later. But what sets this device apart from the existing arrangement of workstations from this brand? Is it worthy of an upgrade? Is it a decent enough successor to the MS-01, given that the MS-02 was this big, beefy Ultra Series nightmare box? And should you go for this? I'm going to give you 5 good things about this device and the brand. But I'm also going to give you 5 bad things about this device and the brand. So let's crack on with number 1. Now, normally the first thing you're going to hear most people talk about with this device is going to be the inside, and we will get onto that. But for now, I want to talk about the outside. I want to talk about the network connectivity on this. Now, ignore these 2 ports here at the top. That's because I've loaded in a 25 gig network card for other testing I'm doing here on the channel. So try to ignore that, but I will refer to that later on. But what I really want to talk about are these network ports. What we have here is 2 10 gig SFP ports, 1 10 gig copper and 1 25 gig, and it's also got Wi-Fi 7 inside as well. That is an enormous degree of network connectivity out the gate. Alongside that, featuring that physical times 16 slot there, focused on the word physical, we'll come back to that later, and the device arriving with dual Thunderbolt 4 connections or USB 4. This thing is scalable as hell given its size in terms of network connectivity over time. Now, the amount of throughput you get and the mileage from those network ports, it's really going to come down to what you put under the bonnet. More on that later. And alongside that, the controllers inside with the 10 gig SFPs rocking on Intel X710s and the copper port there being a Realtek, the 8127. You do have mismatching network controllers there for each architecture, but it still should all work within the same network flow, with all of them appearing alongside the Wi-Fi 7 in the copy of Windows that was included with this. And obviously, depending on the software you choose to install on it, if you go down the Linux route or some Debian NAS type stuff, then your driver mileage might vary. But ultimately, it's really hard to fault this in terms of that network connectivity. Come on, we're going to talk about that design. I know it's been several years, and I know we've seen this design in other devices from this brand, but it's still just absolutely chef's kiss. Notwithstanding the ventilation on the front, the ventilation on the base, the ventilation on the top, the ventilation on the back, but the system takes advantage of that incredible slot load design. That means maintenance, troubleshooting, upgrades, downgrades are painfully easy. Add to that the system arriving with not only a cooling system here that lives on top of the storage media, and another fan here with a vent chamber directly filtering onto the dual copper pipe design over that CPU. For such a compact device, this thing has got design, aesthetics and cooling coming out of the wazoo. But that also extends, by the way, to if you want to talk about the noise and the cooling. When we had the system in operation during idle, it sat at around 31 dBA. When I had the system being heavily accessed for some of the graphical and CPU testing, I'll show you in a moment, it only got to about 39 to 41 dBA. And that continued on to the thermals. When we had the device up and running for intermittent testing over the course of 3 days, again, whether that was the CPU testing, the graphical testing, the SSD testing that we'll talk about all in a moment, the device never really went higher than about 44 degrees and went down to about 38 to 39 degrees around the external chassis. And a lot of that is to do with that funneled ventilation running all the way through the system. It is very controlled, very refined. And once again, is one of the reasons why, as a workstation, I still use the MS-01 over there for bench testing 10 GBE NAS devices, and I still use the MS-A2 for some of my video recording and live streaming. This design is designed for heavy usage over great deals of time, for that cooling and ventilation running away through the device. How sustainable and how reliable that is will come down to your own mileage, and don't you worry, we'll get onto that in the other half of the video. But at least in terms of the aesthetics and design of this workstation, Minisforum is still knocking it out of the park. Come on, we're not going to have a YouTube channel about network storage and not talk about the bloody storage of the device. And I'll tell you right now, again, really pleased with it. As mentioned, it has its own dedicated cooling system there on top of the M.2, and there are 3 M.2s inside there. Now, 2 of them are Gen 5 times 4 speed, and one of them is Gen 4 times 1, which is a little disappointing when you look at the other 2. Now, I didn't have any Gen 5 SSDs here in the studio to put inside this. Unfortunately, all of my benchmarks were on 4 times 4 drives, and I saw 5-6 gigabytes per second easy, which is all fine, and with the SSD testing with game loading, all absolutely great there in the background. But alongside that, just like other generations of the Minisforum workstation series, this kit also arrives with that adapter for adding U.2 larger drives up to 15 terabytes, and it only occupies 1 of your M.2 slots. So it still means that you can have 2 more M.2 slots running there in the background and a larger capacity SAS SSD doing its job inside under the bonnet as well. So again, lovely scalability for such a compact device. But we've got to talk about the processor, haven't we? And depending on where you are in the world, there's actually 3 different CPUs to choose from, but different regions have different options available to them. The total number of them is the Intel Panther Lake Ultra 9, Ultra 7 and Ultra 5. However, for some reason, the 7 isn't available everywhere. The US only has the 5 and the 9. The UK seems to only list the 9. I don't know if it's a stock or availability or a pricing issue, but just be aware of that if you're considering buying the MS-03 for yourself there. Also, not only does that affect the price, but it affects some of the feature set. For example, the Ultra 9 and the Ultra 5, they both support vPro via those network ports, but the 7 does not. So the 9 and the 5 does, and the 7 doesn't. Sorry if I got that muddled up. However, let's talk about the capabilities. Let's focus on the 9, because I've got the Ultra 9 version here, and that is again a Panther Lake 16 core processor with 4 power cores, 8 efficiency cores and 4 LP cores. In terms of AI support, it goes up to 50 tera operations per second, and it does have integrated graphics. That means you are going to be able to run a lot of LLM services there, image recognition services and more, and we will talk about it a little bit more in the other half of the video what you can and can't do with that AI functionality. But that's with Gen 4 and Gen 5 architecture, again, will differ. Now, in terms of the testing, when I went for CPU profiling there, and we did the extended multi-thread test, it ended up being with 3D Mark 10,323. With PC Mark running all of the different Office applications, which for a workstation is what you might expect if you're not going to be running an AI LLM on this, that sat at around 8,418 with PC Mark. Now, I went with integrated graphics tests simply for context, because this is running integrated graphics, but I still wouldn't really recommend this device for gaming, really. There are better options, and better options, I would argue, at this price for Minisforum themselves, as well as others. But when I went with the Night Raid integrated graphics test, I got a score at the end of 25,456. Likewise, there was a still Nomad Light test where I got that at the end at around 2,137, but the frames per second really only sat at about 14 to 15 frames per second. So again, I wouldn't really recommend this for gaming. In terms of memory, this has not gone for LP memory. You do have to get your own memory if you go for the bare bones model, as the name suggests, but it is still SODIMM memory, so you've got that option for you, and it's DDR5 up to 7200 inside. So good memory choices, but again, costly memory choices, something of course we'll talk about in a wee bit. And further on from that CPU, something that really surprised me, not just because of this CPU architecture, but also because of different Minisforum devices I have tested, was that it wasn't that power hungry. I really expected it. Now, a lot of credit to this, of course, goes to this being quite a streamlined SSD-focused device, and indeed the Intel Panther Lake really having as low as possible idle power consumption a lot of the time. But even then, I was really impressed. When I had the system sat in idle, it only consumed around 10.1 watts. When I went for that CPU testing I mentioned earlier on, during the max thread testing there, that's 100% CPU utilization, it went up to 76 to 77 watts. Previous generation Minisforums, particularly the Ultra 2 series, but some of the A series ones, went into the triple figures easily. Some of them sat around 160 to 270 watts power consumption. And given this arrives with a 240 watt PSU already, I was really expecting that CPU to break to triple digits real easy. And when I went during the graphical performance testing there, with all graphical capabilities being used, it only went to 37 to 38 watts. So again, really impressive power consumption numbers there for a system that on paper seemed to be very aggressive in terms of its hardware. But much like any of the Minisforum devices, there are things about this that aren't going to be for everyone. There are things about Minisforum that aren't going to be for everyone. So alongside the 5 good things, we got to talk about the 5 bad. The price point of Minisforum workstations always divides the room. Now, some of you are going to look at the price tag in at least the bare bones model and think, do you know, that's not too shabby. With the Ultra 9 version sat at $999 and the Ultra 5 version sat at $759. But of course, they are the bare bones model. They're the ones that don't have the SSD for your OS, don't include Windows as well if you were going to use that, and don't include any RAM. And if you looked at the price of these components these days, now they do provide options that have got a terabyte SSD and a bunch of memory, but then those prices go absolutely bananas. Now again, if you try to source those components independently, they're probably going to cost you not a dissimilar price point, but at least then you've got the element of choice, whereas when you go for the pre-configured versions, you don't really have a great deal of say over the memory or the SSDs that are going to be used. Generally the SSDs are pretty solid brands, normally Kingston they use in their systems, but also when it comes to the RAM, you're never completely sure. And alongside that pricing, that comes back to that point about whether some of us see value and some of us see the price point, and ultimately some of us see the long-term spend. Because again, if you compare these to your Lenovo's, your HPs, your Dells or whatever, then this is going to appear very, very affordable for that price tag. But it ain't cheap, you know, with the bare bones model sitting at $1,000 and you're going to have to spend, you know, 200, 300, 400, 500 nicker just to really spread that cost out and get the rest of the core components if you don't have them knocking around. So just be aware, yes, this is good value, but it ain't cheap. For all of the nice things that I've said about the design at this point, we got to talk about some limitations. Limitations that I would argue have been pretty systemic in the whole history of this workstation design. That although this is a great design bit of kit, and I think most would agree with me at least on that in terms of aesthetics, design and placement is pretty darn good, it's not without its limits. Probably one of the earliest limits a lot of users find is the bloody power brick. It is huge. It's almost half the size of the device it's inside. Now, why is that a problem? Because it's a barrel. This thing here, and it doesn't sit in especially nicely. It kind of clumps in, but it's never really felt rugged. It's always felt a little bit loose inside there, and particularly if that falls off a desk, That is an accident waiting to happen. Alongside the architecture of the PCIe, I am double chuffed that with all of that network connectivity, we've still got the option to add a PCIe card. But there ain't much space in there, I'll tell you that. And alongside you needing a very small form factor PCIe to go in there so you can forget your aggressive GPU cards, although some are out that fit that space, keep in mind that even though it's a physical times 16, it's actually a Gen 4 times 4 actual slot. So that means you're not getting that full times 16, and depending on the discrete graphics card you might want to be putting in there, or a storage card. That's why I think I'm okay with the network card I'm putting in. You're going to see potential limitations there. Alongside that, the USB 4 that I mentioned earlier on, so you've got a couple of USB 4 ports there. So again, adding network adapters, adding storage devices, maybe adding a docking station. I will say, it is a bummer that those ports are not on the bloody front where I want my USB 4 ports to be. And this has been a persistent trend with Minisforum, always sticking them on the back. Look how busy the back of that device looks. And add to that busyness, as hopefully you can see from earlier stock footage when I'm utilising this card, there's just not a lot of space. And it's also, you know, all that gathering of heat, it means I didn't really want to use those USB 4 ports there. So yes, it's good they're there, and yes, this is a discrete mini compact workstation, but just keep in mind that this being compact does lead to its own special problems. Back when the original MS-01 rolled out, most people were using them, as the name intended, as workstations, using them for testing larger arrays, using them for hosting in clustered form for different high availability and virtual machine environments. They're all just standalone systems. That's what I use the MS-01 for still over there. But fast forward to now, and a lot of users are looking at these systems primarily for AI deployment, for local language models, maybe an AI agent wrapped on top, for their workflows, for their creative workflows to a degree. However, even though the official website is absolutely riddled in AI references and AI utilization, and the CPU inside the official pages for that Intel CPU are riddled in AI as well. I will say this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and don't think this is going to do everything that's currently the desirable factor in AI in 2026. Things it can do: small LLMs, local chatbots, agents, RAG for image recognition there, identification of text, identification of audio, surveillance utilization as well for edge AI, post-processing. If you're going to be utilizing it for audio and image processing, those things are all going to be good. However, that CPU in this architecture is less geared to large code bases there, higher end stable diffusion, trying to use it for AI video enhancement. Example, loading this to analyze different documents is going to be fine. Sticking a 300-page contract that you're working on for your business and asking it to just drum up with an answer straight away without using edge AI facilities, this thing isn't going to be ideal. It's a good architecture there, will get a lot done. But don't think that getting this is the same as getting a GPU-equipped system, an NVIDIA Jetson dev kit and stuff like that. A little bit more pricey, but those have got integrated graphics on board for far more aggressive AI utilization. This has a lower glass ceiling. It is about individual processes. If you're going to have a multi-user AI deployment, you may have trouble. If you're going to run them at different sites, then you might be all right. But just keep in mind that the AI functionality here is not without its limits. Let's talk about support. Let's talk about reliability, because Minisforum is starting to get a bad rep on this, and they've really got to sort something out here. Now, again, hands in the air, none of the devices that I've ever used, be they the 2 that I have purchased or the 5 I think that they have sent me, none of them have ever failed on me. And as described earlier on in the video, they are still running, as are the NAS for that matter. However, I know people that have had a failed Minisforum device. We don't have to go that far. You know, friend of the channel, someone I talk about a lot, Alex from KTZ, he had a Minisforum 01, and it just one day just died. And luckily, Minisforum stepped in and sent another one, but that's great, but not everyone's going to have that fortune. And when we look online, there is just an increase in the amount of disquiet from punters. I have always been of the mind, and you've heard me in other videos say this, that if you look for issues and you look for warranty problems, you will find them. So looking for them isn't the same as a growing trend in this fashion. However, you can't ignore the number of complaints about Minisforum products, the number of complaints about devices just dying all of a sudden, or some of their problems and the support they're getting from the brand feeling a little bit AI-ish, and it's just a growing trend. It's not systemic. I don't think it is a guaranteed failure, and as I say, I've been over to their HQ, I've been through their testing procedure, and I would argue it was one of the best I'd seen when I was over there. So it's not bad from what I can see, but generally, there just seems to be a whiff of question marks about the support that's growing very slowly there online. It's just something to be aware of. I'm not saying you should go out and look for the word Minisforum bad, because you will always find bad when you are looking for bad, but just browse the Reddit. Just browse it. Just browse the community forums. Don't specifically target searches, just scroll and browse, and you will see what I mean. Now, I'm already in a few different conversations helping out a few punters who are in warranty conversations with Minisforum. Some of them with devices that are outside of the 2-year warranty. One user with it practically arrived DOA. Again, these are arguably, I would say, small numbers in the grand scheme of things, and I don't think it makes them a trash brand. But I will say there is definitely something of a stability and if not a customer support issue that is slowly starting to roll forward, and the brand needs to address this, needs to get better before it can reach a critical point, or at least reach a tipping point there. Do I trust this brand? Yes. Do I still like this brand? Yes. Do I still use their products? Yes. But not everyone feels that way, and I think we need to address it. Anyone that's followed this channel for even 5 minutes on the subject of Minisforum will know that right now I'm just watching my watch for one thing from this brand, and that is an M.2 upgrade card that they sent to me a couple of years ago. It was originally designed for the MS-01, and it was a little M.2 upgrade card, not unlike that U.2 card that I just showed you, but it allowed you to put 6 M.2 NVMe's inside this. Fast forward a year, when I went over to Shenzhen, China, and visited this brand's HQ to see what was going on with their new NAS, they went off and showed me they were still developing that card. However, it's August 2026. Where the hell is that upgrade card? I know people that were looking at purchasing the Minisforum MS-01, and I think actually did during Prime Day, during Black Friday, because of that card, because it gave the functionality of a very, very powerful flash NAS system. Where is that card? Because this device with that card inside there, that CPU I should say, this is going to be great as a local NAS for VM deployment. Proxmox the MF out of this. But where is that PCIe card? And if you have abandoned it, Minisforum, bloody tell me. But there you go, that is the Minisforum MS-03. For me, another great workstation from this brand. Now, I will be doing further testing on this as I'm building something quite nice that's going to be 25 gig through and through. And this is the last part of something I was putting together. And fingers crossed it'll be done soon. But what do you guys think? Have you been a loyal buyer of Minisforum for a while and have sensed the wind of change? Are you someone that was considering looking this after coverage of different tech events and thought, yep, this is the one for me? Are you an existing MS-01 buyer who already had the device and didn't feel it really touch the sides? Let me know below. Obviously, there will be a link in the description to get hold of one of these yourself. And if you do want to support what we do on the channel, using that link and buying a product from there will result in a small commission coming to me and Eddie and allows us to keep doing what we do. But don't do it unless you found a video helpful. Also, there will be a written review link below, as well as other videos on Minisforum products that I've already talked about that I will link below, as well as that bloody SSD card. And if you're listening to Minisforum, get that card out there for the Lord's sake. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.